بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة على رسول الله صحبه ومن والاه وبعد. So we continue with our study of this book Kitaab At-Tawheed, the Shaykh Islam Mohammed ibn Abdulhab alayhi rahmatullah. Reading from and benefiting from the commentary of our noble Shaykh Allama Ubaid ibn Abdullah Al Jabirī, حفظه الله ورعاه. And we left off in the last sitting discussing the first chapter and the verse which the chapter is predicated upon. The verse which the chapter is predicated upon. And that is the statement of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created the jinn nor mankind except to worship me. We pick up this evening, inshallah ta'ala. Now, we pick up this evening, inshallah ta'ala, from the second wajh we were discussing, what this verse it contains within it, and how the ayah which the author commenced the chapter with is the speech regarding it being from two angles, and we discussed the first angle, and that is the ma'na of ibadah, or the meaning of worship. So the second angle from which we speak regarding this ayah, فيما تضمنته الآية من الفضائل, what this verse contains from fada'il and virtues. What this verse contains from fada'il and virtues. The first fa'idah which we get from this verse is the wisdom for which Allah Ta'ala has created the thaqalain, meaning mankind and the jinn. The reason for which Allah Ta'ala has created mankind and the jinn. And that reason is the ibadah of Allah Ta'ala. So Allah Ta'ala, He did not create us for the purpose of playing basketball or singing or some dunya affair. Rather, the purpose for which Allah Ta'ala has created us and placed us upon this earth is to worship Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is seen in the statement of Allah Azza wa Jalla, وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. This ma here is ma nafiya. He has not created the jinn nor mankind for any other purpose or objective. إِلَّا being an adat al-istithna. It is a tool that is used for exception. And when it comes in this context, it denotes hasr or restriction, meaning that this is the reason for which Allah Ta'ala has created us. He has not created us for any other objective besides this, the worship of Him Azza wa Jal. وهل هذه العبادة مرادة شرعا أو قدرا. So we know, as we discussed previously concerning the irada of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and that which Allah Ta'ala wants, is it is from two angles. It is that which He wants from us legislatively, from a legislative standpoint, such as the worship of Him Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, such as being kind and dutiful to our parents, such as the performance of certain acts of His legislation, salah, zakat, fasting, hajj, so on and so forth. This is what Allah Ta'ala wants from us from a legislative standpoint, to believe in Him Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, to stay away from disbelieving in Him, and so on and so forth. And then you have the irada al-kawniyya. The irada al-kawniyya, also known as al-irada al-qadariyya. That which Allah Ta'ala wants from a universal standpoint, or that which He wants within His divine decree. As it relates to what Allah Ta'ala wants, this is things such as the sun rising, and such as certain individuals living and dying, people getting sick, people being enriched, people being or experiencing poverty, and so on and so forth. These are all things that take place within the scope of Allah Ta'ala's irada al-kawniyya, his universal will, or what He wants from a universal standpoint. So when Allah Ta'ala, He mentions that He has created us for this purpose of worshiping Him, then the Shaykh, he presents this question. This ibadah, is it something that Allah wants from a legislative standpoint, or is it something that He wants from a universal standpoint? And without doubt, it is something that He wants from us from a legislative standpoint. The fa'ida athaniya, the second fa'idah, the second benefit that is contained within that is contained within this verse, al-imanu bi wujud al-jinn, is iman in the existence of the jinn, the fact that the jinn exist, and that is seen in the statement, I have not created the jinn nor mankind except to worship me. وفي هذا رد على من فسر الجن بأنها ميكروبات. So in this lies a refutation against those who claim the jinn are merely microbes. They're not a separate and distinct creation that live alongside humankind or mankind in this dunya. Rather, they say that they are simply microbes. This verse is a clear refutation against them, because Allah Ta'ala does not hold or a microbe accountable for his worship. Allah Ta'ala does not judge a microbe or paradise on the basis of their actions. Now, and this is because microbes are not aqila. They don't have intellect. They have no intellect. Therefore, we say that in the verse lies an indication towards the obligation of believing in the existence of the jinn. بأنهم أقلاء مكلفون, and the jinn are uqala, and they have intellect, and they are mukallafun, meaning they are responsible for the actions which they do in this dunya. That is the second fa'idah that we get from that verse. The third fa'idah that we get from the verse is مقتضى تكليف الجن بالعبادة أن يثاب مطيعهم ويعاقب عاصيهم. That what we get from this verse is that since the jinn are responsible for worshiping him tabaraka wa ta'ala, then the obedient amongst them are rewarded for their obedience, just as the disobedient amongst them are punished for their disobedience. Just as mankind is. Just as mankind is. So, just as we are responsible for what we do in this dunya, and we're going to be questioned by Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, we are obliged to believe in him, to worship him alone, to follow the prophets and messengers. Similarly, the jinn are obliged with the same. They are obliged with the same. وقد ذكر الله تعالى شيئا من قصتهم في سورة الأحقاف. Allah Ta'ala has mentioned something from their story within Surah Al-Ahqaf, wherein he said, وَإِذْ صَرَفْنَا إِلَيْكَ نَفَرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقُرْآنَ فَلَمَّا حَضَرُوهُ قَالُوا أَنْصِتُوا. And we sent towards you, O Muhammad, nafar, a group amongst the jinn. Now, in the scholars, they have mentioned concerning this nafar, how many it is. Some of them mention various numbers. Some of them mention it is somewhere between 3 and 9 in number, and other than that from the statements which they make. But he had sent to the Messenger of Allah, a group amongst the jinn, listening to the Quran, and when they attended that gathering, they said, Ansitu, be quiet and listen. Be quiet and listen. فَلَمَّا قُضِيَ وَلَّوْا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِمْ مُنذِرِينَ. And when the recitation was completed, they went back to their people as warners. The jinn went back to their people as warners, calling them to Islam. قالوا يا قومنا إنا سمعنا كتابا أنزل من بعد موسى مصدقا لما بين يديه يهدي إلى الحق وإلى طريق مستقيم. And they said, "Oh, our people, we have indeed heard a book that was sent down after Musa." Pay attention to this portion of the verse. It was sent down after Musa. Who was the speaker? The jinn. Proving that they were cognizant and aware of the da'wah of Musa. Now, so this book that was sent down بعد Musa, after Musa, he said this book that was sent after Musa. Now, مصدقا لما بين يديه, affirming that which was before it, calling to the truth and directing towards the truth, and calling towards the straight path. يا قومنا أجيبوا داعي الله وآمنوا به يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم. They said, "O our people, respond to the caller of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and believe in him. And the result is that he will forgive you of your sins. وَيُجْرِكُمْ وَيُجِرْكُمْ مِنْ عَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. He will save you from the painful torment. This is Surah Al-Ahqaf, verses 29 through 31. فَفِيهَا أَنَّهُمْ بَلَغَتْهُمْ الرِّسَالَاتِ. In this lies a clear indication that the previous messages of the previous messengers reached them. They were around and they heard the da'wah of Musa. Likewise, there were jinn around that heard the da'wah of Ibrahim, that heard the da'wah of all of the prophets and messengers. And they were aware of that. And this verse is a clear proof and indication of that. Because they were aware of what Musa was calling to. إِنَّ سَمِعْنَا كِتَابًا أُنزِلَ مِن بَعْدِ مُوسَى. Indeed, we heard a book that was sent down after Musa. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ, as an affirmation of what came before it. So they knew what was in that book. They knew what was in it. So, because when they heard the Quran, they understood that it was an affirmation of what came before it. يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ, guiding towards the truth, وَإِلَى طَرِيقٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, and towards the straight path. This is what is connected to the verse that the author used to commit Kitaab At-Tawheed, or that which he used to commit this bad. وَنَأْتِي إِلَى الْآيَاتِ بَعْدَهَا. Now he's going to mention some of the verses that came after it, the verses that come after that, that verse within Kitaab At-Tawheed, along with a short explanation of that. فالآية الأولى هي قوله تعالى. The first verse is the statement of Allah تبارك وتعالى: لقد بعثنا في كل أمة رسولا أن يعبدوا الله واجتنبوا الطاغوت. And we have indeed sent amongst every nation a messenger saying, worship Allah and avoid the false deities. So we see in here a clear indication of the testimony of faith. Because the testimony of faith, it contains within it, أيها الأخوة والأخوات, both an affirmation and a negation. An affirmation and a negation. We say La ilaha illallah, the negation is the statement La ilaha. Right? You are negating the validity of worship for anything other than Allah wa ta'ala. We say illallah, that is the affirmation. You're affirming worship for Allah ta'ala alone. Where is that indication inside of this verse? It is in the statement of Allah wa ta'ala, U'budullah, here's your affirmation, worship Allah, which tanibu taghut, and avoid the false deities. That is your negation. That is your negation. قَوْلُهُ وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا, he said, and we have indeed sent. لَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا. الْبَعْثُ فِي اللُّغَةِ مَعْنَى الْإِنْبِعَاثِ بِالسُّرْعَةِ. The meaning of al-ba'ath in the Arabic language is al-inbi'ath bis-sur'ah, is something rising up, or something being risen up quickly. وَالْمَقْصُودُ بِهِ إِرْسَالُ الرُّسُلِ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِمْ مِنْ وَحْيِهِ إِلَى قَوْمِهِمْ بِشَارَةً وَنِذَارَةً. The meaning of it here, or what is intended by it here, is the sending of the messenger, the sending of the messengers with that which Allah Ta'ala has revealed to them from His revelation towards their peoples as a glad tiding and a warning. But Rasul fil Lugha, now he's going to mention the meaning of a messenger in the Arabic language. The meaning of a messenger in the Arabic language, it is upon the pattern of fa'ul, meaning the word Rasul is upon the pattern of fa'ul in meaning of the Arabic language. It means muf'al. It bears the meaning of muf'al, meaning one who was sent. The one who was sent. Muf'al is here the object of a verb. He says that وهو رسول بمعنى مرسل. So therefore, he is a Rasul with the meaning of a mursal, or one that was sent, one that has been commissioned. وهو بن حمل رسالة, and it bears the meaning of the one who carries and bears a message. The one who carries or bears a message. والمراد به شرعا, the meaning of it legislatively, هو رجل من بني آدم أوحى الله إليه بشرع وأمره بتبليغه. It is a man, as there were no prophets or messengers that were women. from the conditions of prophethood is that he be a man, rajula, manhood. This is amongst the conditions of prophethood. And the ulama, they mention other conditions as well from them, that he be a human and not a jinn. But what is correct is there were no prophets that were jinn. Naam, and he be male, rajula, uh, yani, and likewise that he be a free person and not a slave. Be a free person and not a slave. Now, so he says in the definition of the Rasul, legislatively, it is Rajul in Bani Adam. He's a male, and likewise he's a human. Awha ilayhi bi shar'in. Allah revealed to him a legislation, وَأَمَرَهُ بِتَبْلِيغِهِ, and he commanded him to convey that to others. Is the meaning of Rasul. وَأَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الرُّسُلْ صِنْفَانِ, and note that the messengers are of two categories. صِنْفٌ هُوَ نَبِيٌّ رَسُولٌ. You have a category that is a prophet and a messenger. He's a prophet and a messenger. وَهَذَا مَنْ كَانَتْ شَرِيعَتُهُ مُسْتَقِلَّةً. This is in reference to those messengers that their legislation is distinct and separate from the other legislations, meaning that the messenger was sent with his own legislation. This category, which the Shaykh is alluding to here, the likes of them are our Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu. He had a legislation that was specific to him. And likewise, Musa alayhi salam had legislation specific to him. Isa, the same. Ibrahim, the same. Now, so those prophets that were also messengers, they have their own distinct legislation. مثل أولو العزم, such as the أولو العزم عليهم الصلاة والسلام. وكذلك هود وصالح والشعيب وغيرهم عليهم الصلاة والسلام. هذا يسمى نبيا رسولا. He likewise mentioned others amongst them, and this is the prophet messenger. This is the prophet messenger. والصنف الثاني, the second category, هو نبي فقط. It is the one that is only a prophet, meaning he's only a prophet and not a messenger. وهو من أرسله الله مقررا بشريعة سابقة أو بشريعة سابقة. This is the one who Allah Ta'ala sent him as a muqarrir. He was an affirmer of the previous legislation. He didn't come with his own legislation, but rather he was upon the legislation of the messenger that was sent before him. ومن ذلكم أنبياء بني إسرائيل من بعد موسى عليه الصلاة والسلام. And this is the case of the majority of the prophets of Bani Israel. After the sending of Musa, you found the majority of them were upon the Sharia of Musa. The majority of them were upon the Sharia of Musa, such as Yusha ibn Nun, likewise Yahya and his father Zachariah, and other than them, and they are many. وبهذا تعلم خطأ تعريف النبي الذي يقول النبي رجل من بني آدم أوحى الله إليه بشرع ولم يأمره بتبليغه. So due to this, Shaykh Ubaid is mentioning that you're able to know the mistake or the error of those who define the prophet as one whom Allah Ta'ala, or they define the prophet as being a man amongst Bani Adam who Allah reveals a legislation to, but he does not command him to go out and convey it. He doesn't command him to go out and convey it. هذا خطأ. This is a mistake. It's a mistake. The majority of the ulama, they say that there's a difference between a prophet and a messenger. And the difference is the prophet is one who Allah reveals a divine revelation to. Not a Sharia, but he reveals to him a divine revelation. But he does not necessarily command him to go out and propagate it. The messenger is the one who Allah reveals a divine revelation to, and he commands him to go out and propagate it. So therefore, every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. Okay? So the Shaykh is saying it is a mistake for some to say that the Prophet is one who Allah reveals a legislation to. No, the prophets, they were upon the legislation of the messenger that came before them, as is the case of the majority of the Anbiya of Bani Israel. They were upon the Sharia of Musa alayhi salam. But the messenger, yani Allah Ta'ala, he reveals to him a Sharia, a legislation, and he commands him to go out and propagate it. There may no ishkal to that, inshallah ta'ala. For those who say that the Prophet receives a shara, a legislation, but doesn't command him to go out and propagate that legislation, هذا خطأ. It's a mistake. وإن كان هو المشهور عند عامة طلاب العلم, even though it is something which is widespread amongst a large amount of the students of knowledge, ولا يكادون يعرفون غيره, to the point that many of them don't know anything other than this. ولكنه خطأ بدلالة الكتاب والسنة, but it's a mistake by way of what is indicated by the Kitab and the Sunnah. وهذا قد بسطناه في غير هذا الكتاب. We have spoken at length regarding this in other than this place. You can refer to, for example, in this topic, Shaykh Ubaid's explanation of the three fundamental principles, Shaykh Mohammed ibn Abdulhab, and he has much speech regarding this there, inshallah ta'ala. Now, he continues, وقوله في كل أمة, في كل أمة, amongst every ummah, amongst every ummah. والأمة هي الطائفة من الناس. The word ummah, it is a particular nation or set or group of people. هذا هو أحد معانيها. This is one of its meanings. قوله واجتنبوا, you mentioned واجتنبوا, and avoid, بمعنى اتركوا, meaning leave off, ولكن اجتنبوا أبلغ, but the word اجتنبوا is, it is further reaching in terms of its scope than the word اتركوا. لأن كلمة اجتنب تقتضي المجانبة, because the word اجتنب, it necessitates المجانبة, total avoidance of something. Not that you leave it, but you avoid it totally. So therefore the word اجتنبوا here is better than اتركوا. Now, because al-mujanaba is the opposite of al-muqarana, being alongside someone or something. And this is further reaching than al-tark, or the simple abandonment of something. الطاغوت في اللغة مأخوذ من الطغيان. He says that the word al-taghut in the Arabic language, it is extracted from al-tughyan, the transgression. وهي مجاوزة الحد, and it means to transgress the set limit, to go beyond bounds. ومنه قوله تعالى, from that is the statement of Allah Ta'ala, إنا لما طغى الماء حملناكم في الجارية. And when we caused the flood water to reach its limit, to go beyond its limit, we carried you upon the ship. يعني لما جاوز الطوفان حده, meaning that once the flood, that tufan, that flood, it began to reach its limit and go beyond that limit of where water customarily goes, Allah Ta'ala mentions that he carried the children or the offspring of Noah and Noah himself within the laden ship. Now, and this is because the water at that time, with the tufan, when Allah Ta'ala sent the flood, water was coming from above, and likewise it was coming from beneath. It was coming out of the earth, just as it was coming from above the heaven. He said that, and so we carried you upon the Jariyah head, meaning the laden ship, that floated upon the water. هذا إخبار بما امتن الله به على نوح ومن آمن به. This is an ikhbar from Allah Ta'ala regarding that with which he favored Nuh alayhi salam and those who believed along with him. فحملهم في السفينة ونجاهم صلى الله عليه وسلم. He carried him and them upon the ship, and he saved them. May Allah Ta'ala bestow his prayers and his peace upon Nuh and upon his companions. نعم. وقد تضمنت الآية شيئين وإن شئت فقل خبرين عن الله. He said this verse, it contains two things. And if you will, you can say two pieces of information regarding Allah Ta'ala. And the first thing that it contains, the first khabar, إخباره جل وعلا أنه قد أرسل إلى كل طائفة من الناس رسولا, is it contains Allah Ta'ala informing Jalla wa Ala that He has sent to every group of people a messenger. He has sent to every group of people a messenger. يستوي في هذا من علمناه ومن لم نعمله. He says, so this contains or it comprises those whom we know about and those who we don't know about. Meaning nations that we know about, nations that we are unfamiliar with. Prophets that we know about, prophets that we don't know about. Allah Ta'ala sent amongst every nation a messenger proclaiming the same da'wah. He says that now, وَمَنْ سَمَّ اللَّهُ وَمَنْ لَمْ يُسَمِّهِ. Likewise, there are prophets that Allah Ta'ala has named and prophets that He has not named. فَكُلُّ أُمَّةٍ بِنَصْ هَذِهِ الْآيَةِ بَلَغَتْهَا الرِّسَالَةِ. So therefore, every nation, based upon this verse, the message has reached them. The second piece of information that it contains إخباره سبحانه وتعالى عما بعث به رسله إلى أممهم معه أن يعبدوا الله واجتنبوا الطاغوت. Allah Ta'ala informs regarding that with which He sent His messengers to their peoples. And it is that they should worship Allah Ta'ala alone and avoid الطاغوت, the false deities. هذا النصر منه عز وجل أن ما بعث به رسله من دينه يتضمن عبادة الله كما يتضمن النهي عن الشرك. He says, and so this text, or this is the textual evidence from him that Allah Ta'ala, what He has sent His messengers with from His religion and the worship of Allah Ta'ala, just as it contains within it a prohibition of polytheism. فالمراد بالطاغوت في هذه الآية هو الشرك بالله. The meaning of الطاغوت here is the association of partners with Allah Ta'ala. وكيف كان الشرك طاغوتا, and how is shirk طاغوت؟ كان ذلك كذلك لأن المرء جاوز ما أمره الله به من خالص عبادته إلى عبادة ما سواه, because it contains within it an indication that the individual who practices shirk, he has transgressed the set limits of what Allah Ta'ala has commanded him with, from making the worship pure and sincere for Allah Ta'ala alone, and is gone towards the worship of other than Allah Ta'ala, as opposed to him worshiping Him alone. وَلِهَذَا سُمِّيَ الشِّرْكُ طَاغُوتًا, and due to this, shirk is called الطاغوت. We'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, and pick up the next thing from the fawaid that are contained inside of this verse. And Allah Ta'ala's best. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. And I breathe, but the people have some questions, inshallah ta'ala, we can deal with these questions that we have received.
Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for such a favor and for your ample time. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, Ustadh. There were some few questions that came through. The first question was, Malaga to goodness. The questioner says, her husband is preventing her from seeking knowledge on the basis that he is not comfortable with the callers. Rather, he wants her to seek knowledge from the Umayyah. What should she do? Barakallahu feekum.
Feekum barak. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulullah. What she should do, first and foremost, is seek to advise her husband for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, being respectful and using kind words and using good speech. Seek to advise her husband for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal regarding the affair of taking knowledge from Ahl Bid'ah, the people of Tamimi, and regarding the virtue of the callers to Kitaab and Sunnah. Seek to advise him for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Perhaps he would accept the advice. If he does not accept the advice, then we say that this is not something which he must be obeyed in, because this is an affair of deen. It is an affair of deen, and there is no obedience to the creation and disobedience of the Creator. So we've been commanded to safeguard where we take our knowledge from. And we don't take our knowledge from the Mumayyah. We don't take our knowledge from the people of Tamir. And rather, we take our knowledge from people who are upon Kitab and Sunnah with the understanding of the Salaf Salih. And if the affair becomes too problematic at that point, once she continues seeking knowledge from its authentic sources, and she's tried to advise him to the best of her ability, at that point, perhaps she should get someone involved and seek to get someone to advise her husband on her behalf, inshallah ta'ala, and perhaps they will seek, or perhaps her husband will heed that person's advice if he will not heed the advice of his wife. Allah knows best.
No, Jazakumullah khairan. The second question that says, today we see many people combining Salatul Dhuhr and Salatul Asr because of drizzling or because of a cloudy weather when rain hasn't yet started. This gets me worried at times. Please, what is the correct legislation regarding the combining of prayers because of rainfall? Jazakumullah khairan.
As it relates to the issue of combining the prayers due to rain, first of all, we say that the prayers are enjoined upon the believers at fixed times. The prayers, they have fixed times which they must be made in. And we don't depart away from those set times unless we have a legislative reason. And as it relates to the rain due to which we can combine the prayers, then the ulama have defined it as being, it is the rain that soaks the clothing, it makes your clothing wet, it soaks the clothing, and likewise, it makes the pathways muddy. It soaks the clothing and it makes the pathways muddy. If the rain bears these characteristics, then one can combine at the discretion of the imam. If the rain does not have these characteristics, then we don't combine the prayers. So a drizzle, a light drizzle, which would not create any hardship in reaching the masjid, prayer should not be combined for that. Likewise, if it's not raining at all, you merely see clouds in the sky, or you hear that it's supposed to rain later in the day, you don't combine the prayers on the basis of this. So the individual who he comes to the masjid and he finds that the people are doing this, then they are not to combine the prayers along with them, but rather they go home and they make the prayer, they make the next prayer in its proper time, inshallah ta'ala.
Jazakumullah khairan. The next question says, there is a saying that when a cock crows, it means angels are passing by, and when ducks do bark, it means they have seen a devil. How true is this statement? Barakallahu fikum.
I'll figure come about it. With regards to the statement regarding when the cock crows, that it has seen an angel, then we have this narration that comes within At-Tirmidhi that has been graded authentic by Imam Al-Albani alayhi rahmatullah. That comes on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ سِيَاحَ الدِّيكَ فَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ فَإِنَّهَا رَأَتْ مَلَكًا. That when you hear the crowing of a rooster or a cock, then ask Allah for His bounty, for it has seen an angel. وَإِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ لَهِيقَ الْحِمَارِ فَتَعَوَّذُوا بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ فَإِنَّهَا رَأَى شَيْطَانًا. And when you hear the braying of a donkey, then seek refuge with Allah from shaitan, or the accursed shaitan, for the donkey has seen a shaitan. This hadith has been graded authentic by Imam Al-Albani alayhi rahmatullah. As it relates to the affair of a dog barking, then I'm not familiar with anything in this regard. Allah Ta'ala knows best.
Jazakumullah khairan. The next question says, what is fidya and how does one pay off fidya?
The fidya is of various types and categories. If they intend by way of that the fidya of Hajj and Umrah. And the fidya is something that is to be paid when an individual does something that is mahdhur or haram for the muhrim to do, meaning a person who's in a state of ihram for Hajj or Umrah, he does something that's impermissible for him to do, then he must pay a fidya. He must pay a fidya. Or they leave off an obligation, something that was obligatory upon him to do, then he must pay a fidya for that obligation which they left off. As for the fidya of the fasting person, the fidya of the fasting person who is not able to fast during the day of Ramadan due to an illness or what have you, then they pay a fidya. And that fidya is to feed a poor person for every day. They feed a poor person for every day. And the fidya of the person who is not capable of fasting, this is the person who has a chronic illness which they're not going to ever be free of, and the illness prevents them from having the ability to fast. And the illness prevents them from having the ability to fast. As for the individual who has an illness, but the illness does not stop them from being able to fast, or they may have an illness from what or due to which they have to break their fast, but it's not something which they're going to keep with them forever, meaning they're going to recover from it at some point. That this individual must fast, even if they have to make the days up later. So the illness here is of two types. You have the illness that that prevents a person from fasting, and then an illness that does not prevent a person from fasting. The illness that prevents a person from fasting, if it's going to remain with them forever, and they're never going to be free of it, then this person is the one who pays fidya of feeding a poor person for every day. And the way that the fidya is paid, then you feed this individual, a person he may, uh, and he can feed the people after the days of Ramadan has passed them by. So, say for example, if Ramadan has 29 days in it, then you're going to feed 29 people for every day that he would have fasted had he had the ability to fast. If Ramadan has 30 days, it just means that he has to feed 30 people uh, for this day, or for each day. And then Allah Ta'ala knows best.
Jazakumullah khair. Sorry, Ustaz, can we take the last two questions? Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay. The next question says, is it okay that I suffice myself learning online through listening to lectures of scholars of the Sunnah, as there is no madaris or teacher upon the Sunnah in my locality that I can go and learn physically from? How do I go about seeking knowledge? Jazakumullah khairan.
So we say that uh, listening online to lectures of the ulama and the students of knowledge, this is a means amongst the means of seeking knowledge. It is the means amongst the means of learning and seeking knowledge. But if there are no scholars or teachers in your locale, then ideally you should be able to or strive to travel to them. You strive to travel to where the ulama are, because the also regarding knowledge is that it is taken from its people. It's taken from its people, and you can't ask a lecture a book a question. Rather, you can't ask a lecture a question, nor can you ask a book a question. But when you travel to the ulama, the benefit that you get from sitting with them is that you're able to ask them questions and see any clarification regarding affairs that may be unclear to you. And likewise, this contains another benefit in it as well, is that you are able to learn from their adab and learn from their mannerisms. As it was stated that more than 5,000 people would be sitting in the gathering of Imam Ahmed. Out of the 5,000, 500 of them would be writing. Only 500 would be writing the narrations, while the rest of them would be learning from his manners. So you can learn from sitting with the ulama. You can learn about how they deal with the juhal, for example, how they deal with the students of knowledge, and how they deal with the other ulama. Perhaps you can learn manners of dress from them. You can learn any other things that you can't learn necessarily from simply listening to the lectures. But if you are not able to do that, then again, listening to the lectures is a beneficial affair it is a means amongst the means of learning and seeking knowledge until you are able to get to where the ulama are, or to a reliable student of knowledge that can you can sit in front of and can teach you inshallah ta'ala.
Jazakumullah khair. The last question, bismillah. The question says, may Allah grant you goodness. What is the kunut to be recited in witr? Is it recited in every night, and is it allowed to add other form of supplications from Quranic verses and from the Sunnah to Dua al-Qunut? Jazakumullahu khair.
As it relates to the qunut that is recited in witr, it is that which the Messenger of Allah alayhi wasallam taught to his grandson Al-Hasan. And perhaps many of you have heard it and are familiar with it. To the end of that. This is the dua of the qunut that the Messenger of Allah alayhi wasallam taught to his grandson Al-Hasan to be said in the witr prayer. As for is it to be said every night, then no, it is not to be said every night. Rather, a person says it some nights and he leaves it some nights. With regards to adding things to it, the scholars differ regarding this. Can it be added to, or can it not be added to? What is correct, and Allah Ta'ala knows best, is that it can be added to. It is not restricted, such that you can only say this and nothing else. But rather, you can add other supplications to it, either from the Quran or from the Sunnah, or if you have the ability of doing so. And Allah Ta'ala knows best.
Alhamdulillah, we really thank Ustad for the time being with us. We pray Allah SWT grant you goodness and preserve you upon khair, and also aid you in the da'wah, and so be able to benefit from you all this long, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Hope to see you another time. We say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.